The Iran war has brought the oil market into the spotlight. Around a third of global oil trade is and production rather controlled by OPEC, which has 12 member countries. In 2016, the group signed agreements with additional countries to form the OPEC Plus alliance. This alliance controls slightly over 50% of global crude production. The United Arab Emirates has announced that it's leaving OPEC and the broader alliance next month, which could deal a heavy blow to the oil exporting institution. To explore this topic, we're bringing on Rod Martin, founder and CEO of Martin Capital. He's also a foreign policy analyst. So Rod, thank you for joining us this afternoon. So what is your view on this? Why do you think the UAE is leaving OPEC? Why is it making this announcement now?
Well, first of all, Americans should just be giddy today. OPEC is a giant cartel. If it were inside the United States or the European Union, it would be an antitrust violation in its very existence. It would be broken up. It would be all of its principles would be in jail. So eliminating this thing that destroyed America and the West in 73 and then again in 79 with oil embargoes is just a huge, huge victory for American foreign policy. Why did it happen now? Well, the biggest single reason is Iran. They brought it on themselves. Iran is another key OPEC member, as Russia is a key OPEC Plus member. These guys are not helping the UAE. In fact, Iran has been bombarding the UAE. And I'm sorry, they can say, well, we're just hitting American assets. No, they're not. They blew up the Fairmont Hotel in Dubai. They have been attacking civilian infrastructure in a country that isn't at war with them. So the UAE is in a position to ship 5 million barrels a day, up from the current 3 million. It is a pillar of OPEC. The UAE and Saudi Arabia are the key to this entire thing being able to influence global oil prices. Without the UAE, they can increase production dramatically. They can pay for the damage that Iran has inflicted on them. And in the process, they can deprive Iran of even more money. And as you just correctly reported, the Iranians aren't getting any oil out past our blockade. But eventually that ends. So the UAE is sticking it to them, and they are aligning even more closely with the United States and United States production. It is a complete shift of the global energy order.
Okay, so without the UAE, how is that going to impact OPEC?
Well, the only power left in OPEC that really can steer policy is Saudi Arabia. The Russians are off the board for now because all their oil is sanctioned, and we're actively interdicting shadow fleet tankers. So just like in the Iranian case, just like in the Venezuelan case prior to the seizure of Maduro, we have very little capacity for the Russians to influence global oil prices unless Donald Trump personally chooses to let some of their sanctioned oil through, which he's done just to stabilize global markets, but that's not going to last very long at all. So who's left? Well, Iraq is a huge producer, but Iraq doesn't have the kind of pricing flexibility that the UAE and Saudi Arabia have. Iran, heavily sanctioned, not really able to export except through the shadow fleet. And that leaves a bunch of also-rans, a bunch of countries that we get along with in some cases, we don't in others. But what is absolutely certain is they cannot, apart from Saudi Arabia, influence very much. And Saudi Arabia, without the UAE in tandem, is not in even a fraction of the position it was yesterday. So this is now a Saudi club. They can definitely have an impact on the world, but it will be so reduced as to be negligible compared to our entire history with OPEC since I was a small child. And it's just glorious. It's just wonderful. So we're going to get a freer market in energy. We're tightening alliances with countries like UAE and another country that left OPEC, Qatar. And all of that is the result of Trump foreign policy when you get right down to it.
Okay, so distilling all that you said just now, basically you think this is good news for oil prices in the long term, right?
Oh, Don, we should throw a ticker tape parade. This is glorious. It absolutely is. And because you don't have this awful cartel. I mean, cartels are wrong. We believe that as a matter of philosophy. We believe that as a matter of law. In most of the industrialized world, you should not have a cartel like this. It is a conspiracy and restraint of trade by its design. Well, if you blow a big hole in that, then global markets stabilize on actual supply and demand instead of on this undue influence by a cabal that meets once in a while in Geneva, Switzerland, and just decides the fate of the world. I remind you again, this is the cartel that brought about the 1973 oil shock, where oil prices jumped fourfold and never came down, just kept going up. And then we had the second embargo in 1979. They have done material harm to the United States, to the United States citizens, to the entire Western world. And that enterprise is now dead as a doornail. I mean, it is almost as dead as the Soviet Union. And that is a glorious moment. And yes, it will dramatically help the world economy over the next year.
Okay, what is your feeling on whether more countries will follow in the UAE steps? You think more countries are going to quit?
I think probably. I mean, what we're seeing now is this shrunken cartel that's going to have to just take Saudi direction. And a lot of them don't especially want to. And the Saudis aren't going to be able to provide them the kind of leverage that they have had, because the only producer in the whole mix that can meaningfully constrict supply is Saudi Arabia itself. So why would the Saudis bear that burden? And that brings us back to the Abraham Accords. You'll note the UAE isn't just an original signatory of the Abraham Accords. They have become a key defense, intelligence, and technological partner of Israel. Well, the Saudis have talked about joining that too. This is an impetus to doing so. And it is happening at a moment where U.S. supply is filling in the gaps that OPEC used to be able to create. And even Israel has become a significant supplier. They just did a $30 billion energy export deal with Egypt. So we're seeing a reshuffling of the deck. We're seeing friendly countries dominating global energy flows at the expense of global enemies. And it's just glorious.
Okay, so the U.S., has some level, I would say, I mean, at the very least, of influence of OPEC, right? Without the UAE, do you think that influence could increase? Can you just talk to us about the dynamics between the U.S. and OPEC without the UAE?
Well, we used to be their primary target. Now we do have some influence, but the reason for OPEC's existence is to increase the price of oil to the United States and Western Europe. I mean, that's really why it's there. Well, that just went away in any significant sense, but it had already started going away because the United States became functionally self-sufficient in energy production at home, and then became the world's third largest exporter of petroleum and the first largest exporter of refined product. Now we are actually shipping just this incredible amount of liquefied natural gas, or LNG. That's becoming a bigger part of the supply into Europe and into West Asia. Those things are, East Asia, those things are transformative to the pricing structure already. Now, if what you have is a de facto energy alliance, and I stress de facto, not formal, a de facto energy alliance between the United States, the UAE, Qatar, Israel, and almost certainly eventually you end up with Saudi Arabia, OPEC just becomes irrelevant. So I think you're going to see some of these countries go their own way because they don't want to be under pricing restrictions. They've got to maximize their income. And I think Saudi Arabia comes to that same conclusion. So Russia could have an effect on this if Russian supply comes back fully online, but the only way that happens is if they make peace with Ukraine. And the net result of all of this is a new American order globally when it comes to energy. Us, our friends, and China and other countries who are not our friends get to pay our price.
Okay, so this new global order that you speak of energy, what would be the benefits? What would be the benefits of that if the U.S. is on top? What are the real world implications?
Well, the first, of course, is that prices come down meaningfully. I mean, on any given day, West Texas Intermediate is priced at about $10 underneath Brent crude, which is the North Sea price, and that's the normal global benchmark. So you already have a certain divergence. We talk about oil being in a global market, but there's only a limited degree to which that's true. Now, if you get rid of this cartel influence, if you get rid of their ability to influence pricing in a materially, I stress, antitrust violative way, then markets resolve to a lower market rate based on actual supply and demand. That makes basically the whole world richer. Not Iran, not Saudi Arabia, but Kenya and India and of course the United States and certainly Germany. Everybody ends up with lower priced energy, which means their economies do better. The second thing is this does put meaningful pressure on Russia going forward. They're not going to be able to extract the kind of monopoly profits they were able to do before the Ukraine war if OPEC Plus is meaningfully diminished. And third, you've got the Chinese. And the Chinese are the biggest factor here because there was a time when we were the world's biggest importer of petroleum. Now China is the world's biggest importer. So how do they compensate for this? 40% of their oil has been this steeply discounted, sanctioned oil they were getting from Russia, Iran, and Venezuela. Now that goes away and market prices drop. Well, that's great for everybody except China, but 40% of their oil was way beneath market price because of the sanctions. So as this resolves, China starts having to pay market price. That's already beginning. And you see the result. We've got gas lines across China. Their economy is really hurting from the current conflict. And I've been telling you for weeks, Donald Trump is not in a hurry to open the Strait of Hormuz because having the strait closed is the immediate proximate cause of the UAE flipping away from OPEC after all these decades of being one of its two central pillars.
Okay, Rod, just one final question here. Is there any intersection between this OPEC news and the Iran war, or are these two parallel issues?
No, you're exactly right. That's the proximate cause. The Iran war has created a situation in which Iran is attacking the UAE, not just them, 6 other regional countries, for no reason. None of these countries are fighting Iran. They're attacking not military installations primarily, but civilian infrastructure, power plants in Kuwait, desalination plants for drinking water. I mentioned the Fairmont Hotel in Dubai. They have proven themselves to be a rogue state in every sense of the word. So from the UAE's perspective, part of the issue is making more money through selling more oil than OPEC would allow it to be able to compensate for that damage. But the other thing is they don't want to enrich Iran. A strong OPEC makes Iran stronger. And if you reduce the strength of OPEC or just eliminate it entirely, the UAE is in a much better position to be a major market player without the encumbrance of financing its enemies. So yes, the Iran war has enabled this, and the blockade in particular has, because what the UAE sees is they have to be able to get their oil out around the Strait of Hormuz. So what this does is it will result in more pipeline infrastructure, increased shipments across Oman to the Arabian Sea. And as a result of that, they just won't be dependent on what happens in the Strait in the same way. But that wasn't possible as long as they were part of OPEC, because OPEC required them to keep their production and sales to about 3 million barrels a day. They want to do 5 million. They can hit that number next year if they're unencumbered by OPEC. And the Iran war is the proximate cause of why.
Okay, Rod, great comments. Thank you for your time today.
Thank you.